So while we're all currently thinking about making America great, I mean, how about making India greater? And I clearly believe infrastructure spend is a fantastic silver bullet by which we can achieve that. Truly Atmanirbharta.
I think the only question is, make America great is fine, but not at the cost of, other nations in the world. If it's going to come to tariffs, etc., and where does India stand? Perhaps that's...
See, Tamanna, that's the problem with Trump. Trump has a zero-sum view of the world.
Yeah.
Either you win or you lose. Yeah. Either you dominate or be dominated. He doesn't understand the world that America created post-World War II and more so after the Cold War. Where, can you imagine an America under Trump supporting Japan and Germany were beaten in World War II? Or can you imagine the kind of exports that allowed Taiwan, Singapore, Korea to become a part of the developed economy of the world? It won't happen. He thinks a very reductive view of the US presence. And I always have this famous saying by Rudyard Kipling, what does he know of America who only America knows? To paraphrase him. Well, Trump clearly knows the pulse of the American electorate. He doesn't understand, and his particular electorate doesn't understand America's role in the world, how they shape the world, and how, by spreading prosperity to even countries like Japan and Germany, they spread prosperity to themselves, improved the standard of living, made a secure world, supported multilateral institutions. America's role in the world is historical, and I think Trump doesn't see that. He sees it in a very more narrower sense, and I think that will be the biggest change in the next 3-4 years that we'll have to grapple with.
Right. Prashant, welcome to the show. My question then would be about markets and where they stand at this point. And while we see valuations, and I'm talking about index valuations, and I know this is a very crude way of perhaps valuing markets, but most index valuations are at their 5-year averages. So something like the Nifty, the mid-cap index, and the small-cap index are at their 5-year averages, which means possibly the froth is out, but overvaluation is still in the picture at this point in time. What is your view on this aspect?
Certainly. So I think, as you pointed out, we are at about average levels compared to last 10 years. So I don't see any worry, or I don't think there are worries I see amongst investors, but I don't think, I don't feel worried about the valuations at this time. And particularly, I do think, and somewhat, with all due respect, and I agree with Ramesh that the global uncertainty has increased. But I think a somewhat different perspective here, in that I think re-election of Trump, whether we like him or not at personal level or not, I think is positive for certainly US markets, US economy, US corporate earnings, but also positive overall for many other equity markets. US is as was just mentioned earlier, the largest economy in the world, 70% of global equity markets. If we were to agree that, Trump, who measures his success with stock market as the barometer, and is pro-economy, pro-growth, pro-corporate earnings, that's going to be positive for US, but that US being so large is going to have a gravitational pull on the rest of the world as well. And India, obviously not uniformly across the world, there would be certain countries going by his first term and how he, what actions he took in the first term. It may be negative for certain markets like China, certain economies in the neighborhood of America. But for India, it was positive last time. And I am of the view it would be positive this time as well. So if the largest economy in the world and the 5th largest economy in the world, it is positive. I think net, and maybe it is my inherent optimistic self, but I do think the global backdrop is going to be firm over the next 4 years. And the Indian backdrop as well, I see, continues to remain firm over the coming several years. So given where the valuations are today, it is a very good time to stay invested.
Ramesh sir wants to come in on this point.
Prashant, let me explain to you how transactional I find Trump. For example, he first banned TikTok. Now he's extended TikTok's. TikTok's almost a $1 trillion company, perhaps by valuation out there. At the same time, the same president is banning US steel being bought by Nippon Steel from Japan. Japan is an ally now 50 years in America. It is no national security threat. It's a $15 billion company. It has no employment prospects greater that are affected. In fact, even the US labor wants the US Steel, Nippon Steel merger to go ahead. And yet Trump is opposing that.
But didn't Biden do that first?
Biden do that, but let's leave Biden out. We're talking about the Trump presidency. I'm not trying to see who's better, Trump or Biden. I'm trying to explain the Trump presidency to you. So it is not free markets. Where is he free markets? In the free market, Trump would have allowed his transactional approach, his oligarchian approach. If you contribute to his campaign, if you made him feel good about that, he'll probably support your Bitcoin, he'll support your TikTok. If you oppose him, he will oppose it. That is not the way to run a rules-based system. The world prospered under a rules-based system. And I think that is a good example. It's a $15 billion acquisition. It's irrelevant in the scheme of things. $15 billion for an economy that controls 3/4 of the world economy is irrelevant. And yet he's opposing that. Why? And yet he's not opposing TikTok, which poses an obvious security threat, unanimously passed by Congress, unanimously passed by the Senate to ban TikTok. And yet he's delayed it. Why? Because someone contributed his money. So, you know, what we are having is a transfer from a merit-based, rule-based, democratic system to oligarchy and state-sponsored capitalism in China. And that can't be good.
Any response, Prashant or Nilesh, if you all want to come in on that? Prashant, okay. Yeah.
No, I think what specific examples Rameshji has cited, certainly true. But in any democracy, not all the decisions are taken on the basis of sound economics, even in India. In certain specific instances, like UST that was cited, it is very, or TikTok, it may be that political considerations overtake economic considerations. But if you look at in the entirety, and again, going by the first term of Trump, and I hope this term is better, on the entirety, I think the policies are good for America. From an economic perspective, I'm strictly talking about economics here. And yes, I'm very worried about dismantling of global institutions or pulling away from global institutions like WHO or NATO, which are very powerfully, not as powerful as they should be, but to the extent they're much needed in the global order. But I think here too, there's a lot more rhetoric than real actions. He would take some actions as well, as he has taken, pulling out of climate group and others. But there'll be a lot more rhetoric than actions. And the rhetoric is to force other nations like the European nations to contribute to a greater extent. And it's a negotiating tactic. He's ultimately not going to follow up on everything he's saying.